Hello, the good people over the internet. Today we have with us none other than the singer-songwriter and producer Nikitaa with us. I wouldn't take any more time as well, and I would let her do the thing. Hello, Nikitaa. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking some time out to do this early morning. Okay. Um, so, first of the morning question I have before even we start this podcast is take us through your childhood in a very brief way. That how you grew up, were you born into a kind of musical family? How did you got introduced yourself to music and a lot?
Wow. I was born and raised in Mumbai, so I grew up in Mumbai. And I was born into a family. My mom's side of the family was very musical, but I didn't know that until I was much older. But I was just naturally inclined. I wanted to study everything. I pestered my mom until she got me lessons. She found me a teacher. So it was the same thing with music and with dance. So I started piano lessons and voice lessons when I was really young. I believe I was like 3 or 4. Same thing with dance. I started learning Bharatnatyam when I was around that age as well, and I just kept up with it, and over time it just evolved. I went from learning like classical Indian vocals and keyboard to then graduating to like Western and joining choir at school and things like that. So it was always in my life, and my mom encouraged it. So did my brother. Like my brother was really into rock music, and he always shared that with me. And my mom was super into like old school Bollywood, like 50s, 60s, 70s. So we would spend a lot of time just like singing together, and yeah, so it was just always ever present in my life, and I was always very passionate about it.
Especially in a country like India where we live in, where we get born into, it's a country of arts and culture. Like every household, especially if you come to ever visit Calcutta, like your dad grew up here, like there's a common rule that every household should have a musical instrument. You play it or don't play it, that's not an issue. You should have it. It's like a government policy. Well, government has told us that you have to keep a musical instrument at your house. This is how cultural we are, right? Well, very well. So, your dad or your mom was a musician themselves. They used to sing, do anything.
No, my nanny was a singer. My nanny was a singer and a songwriter, and she studied under she's from the north of India, so my mom's side of the family is from UP. And so my nanny studied under a few ustads, but she was always told like you're a woman, it's not meant for you, you're supposed to take care of the house, all of that kind of stuff. And so her dream sort of just died with her. She passed away when I was really young. So she didn't really get to explore it. And my mom used to sing, but she never pursued it professionally. She was never interested in that, even though she had the gift. Um, but she always encouraged my creativity, and she was just always there for it. She saw what happened with my nanny, and she just wanted to be that person in my life who would encourage my creativity. Hmm.
Wow, pretty interesting. Uh, Interesting question. What it's like to be a musician while you were in India?
Oh my gosh, what was it like to be a musician when I was in India? So I actually started my career in LA. So my first professional sense of working was here. And then I moved back during the pandemic. And then 2 years, about 2.5 years, from like late 2019 all up until early 2022, I was in India. And so I wanted to experience performing live and doing all the stuff that, like, which is like normal bread and butter for most musicians, regardless of where you're at. But my experience ended up being, recording music videos at home, and doing everything on my own, and putting out music on my own, and doing Zoom interviews. And that was my entire experience of working in India. It was that. It was wild. And it's so funny. I think the only real experience that I had that was very typical was I have been friends with Ash King for a little while, and we've written together before. And he had a show. He had a New Year's Eve show at the end of 2019, I believe, in Africa. and he needed somebody to come sing with him, and he didn't have anyone, so he quickly called me up and he was like, "Can you come?" And I did. So I randomly flew to Africa and performed at a New Year's show. And it was awesome. It was really great. It was so much fun. But after that, lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. So all my experiences were virtual, doing Instagram lives and singing live, but on like virtual screen. But that was my experience in India. It happened to be a good experience because I feel like we were also in a time where, because everything was shut down, Bollywood wasn't churning out as much music. So suddenly indie artists were getting all of this attention.
Yeah.
Having like a very, very positive experience that I know a lot of artists don't have early in their career. It's a struggle, but I ended up having a really positive experience.
Well, that's an interesting answer. Now tell me, before we begin, wasn't that a good question? Come on now.
That's a great question.
I kind of ask this to every musician who comes in the podcast. I'm like, what the hell do you think of being a musician in a country like India is? And the first thing they're like, I don't know the answer to that question. And I'm like, oh gosh. Uh-huh. Uh, on the realm of this term indie, I got introduced to that in the lockdown itself. All right. So the first singer-songwriting I heard myself was Pratik Kumar, right?
Mm.
And I love the songs he writes. And then I gradually shifted into small setups and bands like When Chai Met Toast and Tawa Chake and all of those indie artists. I must say that the world of indie out there is huge and it's very loving and caring. Like, honestly, the music is very, very beautiful, honestly. Take us through how did you got introduced yourself to the world of lo-fi and indie and all that?
Uh, well, I personally have not been super like a big listener of lo-fi music, I would say, but I have a lot of friends who are. So I've just been naturally exposed to a lot of lo-fi music because a lot of my close friends listen to it all the time. So whenever we hang out, it's just playing in the back. I've always had a great appreciation for it though, because it's just such easy listening. But if you actually pay attention to what's going on with lo-fi, it's just so well crafted, and
Yeah.
it's just all of these subtle little details that when they coalesce, everything sounds really beautiful and simple and good to the ears, but it's actually a lot of complex layering that's going on sometimes with lo-fi. And even if it's not complex layering, just the way everything is processed is very specific and not always easy to do. People think lo-fi is just like, if you're a producer, a lot of people think lo-fi is like feed in the track, turn the EQ to like create like a low pass filter and boom, you're done. That's not lo-fi. It doesn't work like that. And it will never sound good if that's all you're doing. But yeah, so like true lo-fi is an art, and it's not always easy. And it's so interesting to me how um songs, specifically pop songs, because a lot of people like fans will do a lot of like lo-fi versions of pop songs. Like Ariana has a lot of lo-fi versions out there that she doesn't know anything about because fans have put them out. But they're great. They're brilliant. And suddenly a song that is just more about an earworm and the melody. Suddenly, there's so much focus on the lyrics, on the vocal performance, just because of this lo-fi version, which I really appreciate about lo-fi.
So how often do you get this complaint that okay, lo-fi is just have a low pass filter and you're done?
No, I've seen people say that, and like and it's ridiculous. You hear all kinds of things when you're in the music industry. Everyone has an opinion, and I've seen certain people say that. I'm like, what? Like it's so much more complicated than that. You can't just be like low pass filter, cool, lo-fi version. That's not or like slow it down. They'll just like slow the whole song down and then slap a filter on top of it and be like, cool, it's lo-fi now. I'm like, no, it's not even
Get,
close.
get the hell out of here.
Yeah, you didn't even try.
I did, so respect me. Fantastic, man, fantastic. When did you like thought of actually taking music as a career for yourself? And before that, did you even think from the very first day that okay, I can make a living out of playing music, recording, putting out music videos, and all of these stuff? And
Yeah.
as the advent of with the advent of internet, it has kind of become easy now. Anyone can like record an entire EP and upload it to DistroKid or Spotify, whatever it is. So take us through the journey of that, because I guess this in this podcast, what I do is I like to encrypt and like understand all of the journeys of musicians, because a
Yeah.
lot of other musicians who are in the developing stage right now in their careers watch these podcasts. So if you like brief it up, it will be like really helpful for them, because it's very simple. Like I know, nobody shares secrets. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. The gatekeeping is the name of the game very often in this industry, and I don't personally like that. I personally do believe that like you should share, and we should be talking about these subjects more because I remember when I first got in the industry, I was lost. Like I didn't, I and it if it hadn't been for the few people who gave me some guidance and some answers, I would be very stuck. And I don't think I'd be where I am right now. But in regards to, did I always know that I would want to pursue this as a profession? Yes, I did. Did I think of it in terms of money? No, because when I knew was a very young age. I knew when I was like 3, 4. I was like, I want to be on stage to do something that's performance oriented. I want to do something that's creative. Like that was always in the back of my head. And it started to solidify the older I got. And I really, really wanted to pursue it. And like you said, because people keep secrets in this industry, I didn't know where to start. So for me, when I think the first time that I really was like, okay, like I think I have some semblance or some idea of where I should go was when I got in touch with Natanya Lalwani. So she and I shared the same vocal coach, and she had already gone to LA, and she was coming back to teach a songwriting workshop. And so I took the workshop and we ended up becoming friends. And she ended up telling me, like, listen, you're actually good at this. And if you actually want to do this, I want to give you some information. Here's the same school that I went to. Why don't you look out for it? Like the whole faculty, they're all working musicians. Like you'll learn a lot, not just in terms of theory and music, but in terms of how to actually go out there and create something and like have a profession in this field. So I took her up on it. I looked it up and I that's what I did. I went to Musicians Institute just like her. And a lot of what I learned about how to function in this industry came out of my experience at Musicians Institute because all of my mentors, all of my teachers were working musicians. They were constantly performing at gigs, they were recording, they were doing all kinds of things. Like our vocal chair was the coach over at The Voice and American Idol. So I was getting real world advice from these people constantly. So I think the one number one most important thing that I will say is find people. Don't stop until you find people who will actually talk to you and then really listen to what they have to say. Just sit down and listen to what they have to say. Absorb it like a sponge. You don't know when it's going to come in handy. There's
Yep.
advice that I got like years ago that I'm still like putting to good use even now, right? And the second thing is like you will get burned in this industry. Um, there's no two ways about it. There's no way to avoid it. What you can do when you get burned is learn from it. So when I started my career, I had a manager and I worked with him in terms of, releasing the music, marketing the music, doing all this stuff. So there were parts of my career in, I would say, the first two releases, I had a manager. So there were parts of my career over those first two releases that I didn't really have to look at. I knew how they functioned, but I didn't have to look at. And then I had to get really, really, really hands on. But by the time I had to get really hands on, I had had enough conversations with enough people and done this for long enough for me to go, okay, I'm not completely bereft of knowledge or understanding. I can actually make this happen. Um, the main thing that holds people back is not a lack of information. I think the main thing that holds people back is the idea that you have to do all of this yourself. which is difficult. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it isn't, but it's possible. It's possible to do it. And the name of the game is stay a student. Always keep learning. You're not going to ever stop learning. You are constantly growing as a musician, constantly learning new tricks about how to market your music and what's right for you. And the last thing I'd say on the subject is what's right for another artist is not always going to be what's right for you. A lot of the tips and tricks that you can get off the internet or off of YouTube or listening to your favorite artist's interview or whatever is often unlike this, but most of them are often interviews with artists who are signed to major record labels.
Yeah.
So that kind of advice on that level, you have to remember that those artists, again, aren't handling everything themselves. They have a huge marketing team, they have a huge budget, and they have a huge team that they go in and they make music with. So their journey is not your journey. Don't ever compare the two. Their journey is not your journey, and also your journey is not another indie artist's journey, and you have to remember that as well. So take what you can out of someone else's advice, but continue to carve your own path, because what works for someone else might not necessarily work for you. And you
Yeah.
have to remember.
Like I'm learning so much right now, sitting in front of you. So for the audience, I'm saying I'm also sitting here learning, not you alone, right? Okay. Uh, well, that was really interesting. Like for example, all the artists we listen to, like all of the pop artists, let's say, because they are huge right now, especially the K-pop scene in the Western areas, right? Uh, they probably their name has turned into a company themselves. Like they are not musicians. I think they are musicians forward slash entrepreneurs. They have,
Brand. Brand.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of thinking that goes into, like, as you said, like there's a huge team behind themselves doing the research and development, doing the marketing of the music, doing the PR, HR, whatever. So many hours, right? So that becomes, so basically what they've done in one word is delegated some work
Yeah.
to the other people, right? And then they can focus on actually creating the product or the music themselves, right? Uh,
Artists, a lot of us don't have that luxury. You have to do a lot more yourself. So
yeah, yeah. They post on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and whatnot. I don't know. We know the struggle, man. We know the struggle. um, uh, when did you start writing songs yourself?
oh my gosh. I first off started writing poetry first, and I started writing poetry again very, very, very young. My mom loves to tell the story. It was just two lines, but the first time I wrote a poem was like at the age of 2. And then I never stopped. I loved it. I'm a rare case, dude. I'm not even bragging. It's just strange for a kid to write poetry at the
When
age
I
of
was probably 2 or 3, I was probably thinking of, okay, this is called a school. How can I bunk classes?
Exactly. I tell most people that I'm like, oh, they probably think I'm crazy. But yeah, I started writing really, really young. Before I could actually physically write. I had something to say, clearly. And then I think I was around 14 when I actually started to think like, okay, if I can write poetry, then I can write song lyrics, and let me explore that a little bit. But I didn't really share that with anybody until I was probably around 18, 19. Because honestly, what the first 4 years wasn't great. It was not the best writing.
So probably it was inside your wardrobe. Like, yeah, this is mine. I'll not share this with anyone.
I had this little black book, and I just it was always actually literally locked inside my wardrobe, and I would never show it to anyone, like even my mom. Like nobody ever saw it except me, ever.
My God. Like, did you enter the genre of indie at all from a very young age, or what was your first genres of like getting your eardrums listening to music?
Mm, like I was mentioning this earlier, but my first foray into at least English music, was rock. So I was listening to like I was listening to everything my brother was listening to, and my brother is like 8.5 years older than me. So I was listening to Metallica, Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, Goo Goo Dolls, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden.
I
Like
love you for that.
that's yeah, that's what I was listening to right off the bat. And then on the other hand, my other, the other person in my family who was influencing my taste in music was my mom, and she was listening to like Lata Mangeshkar, Asha Ji, like Artie Berman, like all of that, like I said, like 60s, 70s, 80s Bollywood. And so those were my primary two until I hit about like 11 or 12, and I started to then explore for myself. And I was really drawn to pop music. And I think the first few artists that I really latched onto were Nelly Furtado, Whitney Houston, Beyonce were my like main three that I like really latched onto, and I would spend so much time listening to their music. And I loved the way they sang. I think it was like the first time that I heard somebody sing and I was like, "Oh, I really like that. I want to know if I can do that." So I'd spend a lot of time like listening to their music and like trying to emulate what they were doing and figure out how to do that with my own voice. And then as I grew older, it just expanded from there. I really delved into R&B, pop. I wouldn't say too much indie, but I would say like alt R&B and like alt pop as well. Anything that had like good songwriting and cool melodies, especially something that would like challenge me vocally, I wanted to listen to because I am that crazy vocal nerd that's like, oh, it's challenging. I want to try it. I want to try to sing it now. I'm just that person. But I also just love I love artists who can take something that should be complicated and make it extremely easy to listen to. So I feel like artists like Frank Ocean really do that. Like lately, a lot of people have been listening to like Daniel Caesar, Pink Sweats, like all of these artists that do things that weren't really mainstream up until a few years ago now. So I really like that kind of music.
Oh, uh, I remember the first song I listened to. Well, we're born in India, so my first introduction to music was through Honey Singh.
Wow.
So I used to study less and mug up his songs more. I was such a fan.
Uh,
And then I was like, my sister used to listen to a lot of good songs back then. And the first song she introduced me to was "A Stairway to Heaven" by Led Zeppelin. Okay.
oh, classic.
And the first time I heard it, honestly, if I would say I didn't like it, I'm like, yeah, kya hai? Nahin, I don't want to listen to it. Yeah, like exactly. And I thought, like it was so bad. My eardrums were probably sore. I don't know. All right. Then I thought, okay, let's give it one more try. And then I was listening to it. I still remember it was probably 12 o'clock in the midnight. Okay, and I'm in my earphones in my eardrums. I'm listening to it, and then clicks on the Jimmy Page guitar solo, the iconic solos of all time. And I was like, this is interesting. And then I got into bands like Led Zeppelin, like same as yours, like Opeth, Aerosmith, Megadeth, Metallica, and like lot of other bands. And then gradually, I'm a metalhead myself, like some sort. Then I just graduated into Lamb of God and some brutal stuff. Like, yeah. So
I never got into like Lamb of God territory. It just didn't appeal to me. I liked more classic sounding stuff because I felt like it was like a good balance of like because if you think about the lyrics, they're really dark very often.
yeah.
Really dark, like stuff that I don't know why kids would listen to, but a lot of us grew up with it. Like it was just like, why were we depressed? Like what was going on? Why were we listening to these bands? But I like them because it's a good balance between um just great writing. Just if you look at the lyrical content of like, take something like November Rain by Guns N' Roses, or even Stairway to Heaven or Fear of the Dark by Iron Maiden. That's beautiful writing, like really
Yeah.
intricate. and really well thought out. And then the melody on top of it is so well done. And then just the whole arrangement of the song, like everything, it just worked while also being like more hardcore and dark and all that stuff that we love and we think is cool growing up.
And then we realized, no, it's not that very cool.
No, I still think it's cool. I still think it's freaking cool. It's just you grow up and your taste in music changes. That's it. I still go back and listen to all of that still
Yeah, like the first time I heard a lot of bands, like all of that, I was like, this music sounds technical and it's kind of impossible to play. So maybe it will take closer to 4 or 5 generations for me to pick up one song of Iron Maiden, and that's fine. I'll just give up. Um, so the so my introduction to music was through Honey Singh, and then I changed later on, right? So, when was the first? What was the first song you released on social media? And
Mhm.
before you released that, what was your brain going through at that point?
You mean original or just like a cover?
Original.
Original. The first song that I put out that was an original was Honest. So the first song of my career was Honest. And Honest was actually the one of the worst writing sessions I've ever sat in my life. And I love telling this story because Honest was not actually, I didn't write it for myself. We were in a writing camp for a fairly well known artist, and we were writing songs for her. And she did not pick up Honest. So I kept it because I was the primary writer on that song. And it was one of those sessions where like you walk in, we lay down like bare bones production, and we're starting to come up with like melody ideas and like song ideas, and I throw some stuff out, and everyone in the room is just like, no, no, we're not doing that, no. And I swear to God, I'm not exaggerating, I counted after the fact. We were in that session for 13 hours. I had not eaten lunch. I have not eaten dinner because we can't settle down on a melody. And I leave the session. The session is at a friend's place that I am very close to. I leave the session. I go upstairs, get a little bit of food, come back down. They went back to the idea that I threw out at the beginning of the session. Was like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that.
And you were like, oh my god.
It took all my professionalism and patience to be like, okay, great, let's cut vocals and like not punch a hole through the wall. Like literally that.
So
The
13
worst,
hours completely went into waste. If you have to like choose the first idea, go on, do it, man.
the verse, the chorus, everything. Like they kept my original ideas that I'd written in the first hour of the session. It was so frustrating, but that was my first release. And we like me, the producer, my manager, collectively we just decided like, okay, this is the one, let's put this one out first. And that one actually really surprised me because back in the day, this was 2018. I'm saying back in the day like it was like 15 years ago. It was just 2018. But there was no Spotify for artists. There was no way to directly pitch to editorial playlists and things like that. Which is why we were all shocked because it Honest landed on like 3 different editorial playlists. Like it went like overnight from like 0 streams to like 18,000 streams for my first release. And it was just wild to think about. And I'm not saying like every release will consistently be like that as an indie artist, right? But like it gives you some level of hope when something like that happens, on your first release. So I love telling that story because even though it's really the story of writing Honest is really annoying, I guess in the end it was worth it because the song did well.
You kind of got the reward for the entire suffering of 13 hours in the studio, right?
It worked out.
Um, Now the most interesting part of the thing. Take us through bad trip, Sitam.
Oh wow. So I wrote Bad Trip. Um, Actually, I wrote Bad Trip in the beginning of, I want to say, 2018 itself. So the same year that Honest came out. We wrote Honest in 2017. And then I wrote Bad Trip at the very beginning of 2018. And I was in a period of my life where I was seeing someone on again, off again for about like 3 years. And it was very toxic. It was not good for me at all on any level. It was just he was emotionally manipulative. It was just a lot of things, and I was like climbing out of that relationship. And the first version of Bad Trip that ever existed was not even called Bad Trip. It was called something else that I don't even feel like sharing right now. But it was a very angry, angry song when I first wrote it. And some of the parts are still intact. Like the Hindi part has been that way
I
since the
love
very.
that. I love that part.
That's my favorite part of the whole song. It was the first time I experimented with like a multilingual song, like having lyrics from different languages all in one song. It was the first time I experimented with that, and back then nobody was doing it, so I was kind of like, I don't know how this will be received, but I really like it, so let's just go with it. That part and the forgive him mother, he don't know the things he do to me. That part, those parts were, always there from the first session that we sat down and wrote Bad Trip. But I had to put the song down multiple times at first because the production just didn't feel right. Like no matter what we did, it didn't sound right, and the song went through like 4 or 5 different reproductions. Like we were constantly breaking it down, building it back up, breaking it down, building back up. No, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't sound right. It was just really frustrating because I'd never written a song that sounded like that, and so we didn't know what direction to go in. And then I eventually decided, like, okay, let me just put this down for a little while. I really love this song, but I need to not listen to it. I need some space from it so that I can come
Yeah.
back to it time and like figure it out. And that's what I did at the beginning of 2022. Really, I sat down. I was like, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time. And I knew that I wanted to spend at least the entirety of 2022 releasing multilingual music, having songs that were still the same what's becoming my signature sound, but have like Hindi lyrics predominantly feature in the music. And so I went back, I looked at Bad Trip and I was like, okay, I understand what's going on here. I've had enough space from this, and I realized it was a little too angry. And I just wasn't in that same headspace anymore. And so I kind of wrote it from the headspace that I was in after that relationship ended, because that relationship continued even after I wrote the song. So I wrote it from the headspace of when that relationship ended. And really, it felt like after all the ups and downs of all of it, it felt like a literal bad trip. Like if you drink too much or whatever and you're like going through this and you're having a bad night, it felt like 3 years worth of a bad night. And so I wanted to put that expression into a song. And that's what I did. And then I rebuilt, I reconstructed, because I was here, and my longtime collaborator that helped me create the song Mukund, he was in Texas. So I was in India and he was in Texas. And so I recreated the production of the song from the stems that I had from the original. I like mixed those with a lot of new stuff, built out a whole different structure, and it became Bad Trip, and I was finally satisfied with it. I was like, okay, this is really what it needs to be. The verses are entirely different, the structure is entirely different. Originally, Sitam, the is it Sitam ki apne, that was just a bridge. That just happened once in the song. I was like, this is too good to happen only once in the song. This needs to be like the main part of the song. I'm gonna put this everywhere I can. So I Frankensteined that song until it made sense. And then it became Bad Trip. Yeah.
Uh, I'm speechless. The first time I heard your vocals, so the first song I listened to was not Sitam. I listened to Wolf.
Mm.
I heard your vocals and I'm like, oh my god, again, once more, oh my god. It's like, how do you, and this brings me to the question, how did you develop your vocals in such a brilliant way? Take us through that. I like, consider myself as a fan of Nikita. I want to know.
How did I develop my vocals? I think this is where just going into the studio and recording helps a lot, because I actually started going in and recording my songs and specifically writing in studio settings towards the beginning of 2017. And mind you, I did that for like a year before I put out any music. So I was just going in, writing songs, going in, writing songs, recording them, re-recording them, like really going in and playing and discovering what I wanted to sound like. And I think it's good to note for any artist that singing live is very different than singing in a studio, right? Singing live, to a certain degree, yes, somebody might catch you if you sing a wrong note, but it's gonna kind of go a little bit unnoticed, maybe because of the sound system, maybe because of the instrumentation, maybe because the people listening to you aren't as aware of what's going on musically as you are, because they're not trained. It's just an audience. But with the studio, the mic catches everything.
Yeah. A small little frequency also it can catch.
And so the tiniest change in nuance, the mic is going to catch it like this. And so I just took that and I ran with it. I was like, okay, if it's going to catch everything, then I'm just going to try everything. I'm going to throw everything at the wall until something sticks. Well, also because I was a person, I was an Indian person making pop R&B music, and I was trying to figure out how to make music that was authentic to me, to my upbringing, my culture, my influences, because I'm influenced by old Bollywood, by rock, by R&B, by all of these different things. How do I make them make sense while still being me? So I really had to go through that process to make that happen. And I also realized that I have a very wide vocal range, and I wanted to find a way to put it to good use without being like, oh my God, look at me. I can sing all these crazy notes. Like, I didn't want to do that song and dance, but I also wanted to be able to put it to good use. And you hear that in Wolf, like it begins with it's not entirely a whistle note, it's a borderline whistle note. Like it's at the end of my falsetto, beginning of my whistle note range. And I threw that in there not because, oh, let's have a high note, but the whole idea of the wolf and howling, I was just playing with it and I just threw it in there. And a lot of my music comes from that place of like, let me just play with it. What does it sound like if I approach this however I want, as opposed to how I'm supposed to do it because it's supposed to be a pop song or whatever. I was just trying to find a way to make music that was unique to me, as opposed to making music to fit into a genre. So I wasn't focused so much anymore. By like midway through 2017, doing this constantly, like going into the studio constantly, I stopped focusing on creating a specific genre and started just making whatever I wanted. And that was very freeing because it also like undid, because a lot of my music, for example, even Wolf is not about a specific life experience. It's I tapped into an archetypal energy. I wanted to like, we started with the production, and when I heard the production I was like, this literally sounds like, I immediately started to see like a wolf running through a forest. And I wanted to almost like flip the idea of like the stories about the wolf and like Red Riding Hood and like the wolf always being painted as like this bad guy. When in like ancient indigenous myth, the wolf is the good guy. The wolf is like your gut instinct that tells you what to do, what not to do. So like that's not a normal concept for a pop song, right? That you don't see a lot of pop songs that are written in this way at all. And so yeah, so I threw that out the window. I was like, okay, I could write about love and heartbreak, which I do. I do that. But I don't have to constantly do that, and I don't have to limit myself to it. I can write about whatever I want. And that was one of those songs where like people that I knew in the industry would like, we would be talking on the phone, they'd call me, and like the first thing they'd say when the song came out was like, कौन डरता है भेड़िए से भेड़िए से. I was like, this is awesome. Like, I remember a radio interview and they like greeted me with my own song, like the Hindi part of my own song. I was like, this is great. Like, this is awesome. It's well received because it's authentic and it's different.
You know, I love people who have great vocals. Like honestly, like fantastic vocals. Like just out of the world, man. Like honestly. So how did for the audience? I'm saying, do you know that she recently collaborated with?
Amaal Mallik.
I can't hear it. What? Okay, so she collaborated with Amaal Mallik. Yes, the well-known music producer and director. So, how did the meetup happen, and how did the contact happen, and how did you guys think of okay, let's do a remix of this Batship, and that's fantastic as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I honestly like if someone asked me to pick between Bad Trip and Bad Trip Lo-Fi, I'd be in big trouble because I can't pick. They're both. I'm like, I couldn't imagine that the remix would sound so good, but of course, with Amal working on it, of course it sounded as good as it did. I mean, he's got the magic touch, so I'm not surprised that it turned out so great. But you know, actually, Arman and I went to the same school, and so there was a connection there. We lost touch for like years and years. We weren't really close in school either, but we knew of each other vaguely. Of course, I knew who he was because, but like we knew of each other vaguely. And what I didn't know was that similar story, go a generation back. My mom and Arman and Amal's dad went to college together, and they randomly bumped into each other in 2019, and our parents started hanging out, and of course everyone knew what Dabu uncle's kids did, but my he was like, so what do your children do? And my mom was like, oh, my daughter's a musician as well, and just showed them my music, and they were like, oh, this is cool, like this is really actually talented. And they FaceTimed me that very night, and he was like, you're really like this is amazing, like when are you coming to India, let's talk. And so I actually started off with working with Dabuji, and we did a Punjabi song together, and then we did a cover that was picked up by Saregama for their like retro series. We did that together, and just organically started more on the family. And I you know, Amal's one of those people that like unless he really believes in what you're doing, um, supports people who believes what you're doing. And so over time, like I think he was just watching me work and he actually really liked what I was doing. And so we actually started collaborating earlier this year with Zindagi Hai Abhi. So WG and I wrote Zindagi Hai Abhi, and then I did like bare bones production on it. And then Amal took it from there. He was like, I really like this song. I really like what you guys are doing. So I would love to you know flesh this out and work on it. And so he put his magic touch on it, and then Zindagi Hai Abhi happened. And we after that he and I kind of like stayed in touch on and off. Before that, not really, but after that, definitely not really, because he's just that busy. I mean, have you met the man? He's just constantly working on something amazing. He's just that busy. So and then Bad Trip came out, and he's always been one to support my releases. Like, even if we don't talk, he'll give it a listen and like text me and be like, yo, I really loved this part about the song, and like, this was so cool, blah, blah, blah. And so we always had that kind of dynamic. But then when he heard Bad Trip, he actually called me, and I was already in LA. He called me, he's like, what are you doing? Like, why? This song is amazing. I want to do a remix. Please, let's do a remix. And he even said it in an interview. But I thought he was kidding. I was like, "Are you serious? Like, you're serious?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm serious. It's really good. Let's do a remix. Like, let's do a lo-fi version. Why not? Like, that's doing well these days. And I think your song would sound really cool as a lo-fi version." I was like, "Wow." At first, I couldn't hear what it would sound like lo-fi. I was like, I don't know, because I've lived with that song for years, mind you. Like, I started writing it in 2018, so I've heard it over and over again, and I couldn't imagine it that way. But he was like, just trust me. And so we started working on it. We narrowed down a direction, because anybody that listens to lo-fi, there's so many ways to do lo-fi, and there's so many different like subgenres inside of lo-fi. So like the first step was just like identifying, like, okay, what do we want to highlight out of the original song, apart from obviously the vocals, but like what are the other elements that we want to highlight, that we want to focus on, and then how do we want to build this version out. And then after we did that, after that it was just all Amal. Like he diligently worked on it. We would like swap texts, and he would just send versions, and I would send little notes and stuff, and like feedback, and we would just go back and forth. And he is so humble and truly such a musician. Like his passion and his attention to detail is unparalleled. And there's no, when it comes to the music, there's no sense of like ego. You know how like some people will come up with a song and then just get married to it, and then it's like my way or the highway. It's not like that with him. He's just very committed to the vision. He's like, as long as the vision gets executed, this is what we're doing. And he nailed it. Like I barely had anything to say at all. Like he would be like, all right, so is there anything else you'd like to say? I'm like, no, it's freaking awesome. What do you want me to say? Like, there's
Nothing more.
what do you want me to say? It's so good. I felt like I learned so much about like I already pay so much attention to detail, but then Amal is like a whole different level of paying attention to detail.
Still he is asking.
Yeah, and it was just one of those moments. Like the last time I felt this way was when I worked with Nikhil D'Souza on Tum Aur Main. But like it was just this moment of like, wow, I'm learning so much just by listening to how you create music, and it's so fascinating. It was just really great. Also, he's just a really great person. He's so funny. Like every time I talk to him on the phone, he's just jokes, 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 jokes. If you ever talk to him, you should get him to do like he does like great imitations of people. Like he's just really good at like voices. It's wild. Like sometimes he would just pick up the phone and start doing a voice, and I'm like, is it really you? Like stop trolling me. He's great. He's just a great person, great musician, incredibly passionate, um incredibly like intimately tied to his art and his work, and just gives it his 1000%. And also for someone like him, just in general, he knew what he was doing, right? Like for someone like him who is at a certain position in his career, to support indie music in general is a big statement in and of itself. Like to be able to spotlight artists like myself is a big statement in and of itself, because we don't get that very often in this industry. And like we talked about at the very beginning, like there's so much gatekeeping that happens. So it's really refreshing to have someone like Amal actually care about indie music, because it changes the ball game a little bit. It doesn't fully provide equity in terms of power, but like it creates hope that like we can actually have equity, that indie share the kind of success that a mainstream record label artist does. Yeah.
Probably a couple of few more questions, then I'll set you free.
Yeah.
So what's the time right now in LA? What was the time there?
It's 11:25
In the morning.
p.m.
So it's nearly 12 o'clock over here. Okay, so not very much difference over there. Interesting. Uh, Answer in probably 3 lines, if possible. So this is kind of a
Okay.
interesting rapid fire question. Uh, the music industry forward slash music scene in the West versus in India in terms of support, music, and other terms.
Oh God. These
That's a difficult one.
3 sentences? You're giving me 3 sentences for an answer that's actually so complicated.
That's why I said, like, 3 lines. Let's see.
Difficult. Oh God. Okay. So um I will say one word, West, royalties, East, no royalties. Right. Zero royalties. Oh, you wrote a song for a TV show? Cool. Here's a flat fee. You're not seeing any more money after this.
Oh my
Like
god, that's one of the best answers I got.
where in the West, it's like the first thing they'll ask you is like, okay, do you have like your sick permissions and what's your like pub ID and what's your this and what's your ASCAP and what's your BMI and like how here's how you're gonna get your royalties, blah blah blah, like all of this stuff. Like you'll get 20 whatever percentage. Like they'll like do this whole song and dance, and here it's like, oh yeah, here's a flat fee. Now leave. You're done. Like that's it. It's over. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's just it's that's the difference,
Yep, yep,
like
yep.
one of the big ones. I feel like the other one is that a lot of artists in the West managed to have a thriving career without performing live. But I think that in India the model still is like you make the most money, and if you want to survive in the industry, the most money is going to come out of live performance. And a lot of that does include like not just your own shows, but like performing for other people. So being contracted to like do an event or whatever, like that's a huge money maker for artists over there. And there's nothing wrong with that hustle. It's just that it's different. Like you could simply be a songwriter that either writes for other artists or writes for TV or sync placement or do
Netflix.
yeah, like do because you even get paid out uh passive income like royalties for doing a commercial in certain cases. So if your work is featured in a commercial, every time the commercial plays, you're getting money. And then if it's a national commercial, that's a lot of money. So there's certain differences. You can't really do that in India. You do have to perform live a lot more. um yeah, I think I would say like those are the main differences. I think pre-pandemic there was definitely this energy in India of like, oh no, you have to meet people first in person and then you develop a working relationship with them. But I feel like the pandemic sort of changed that, where like I could send an email or like have a Zoom meeting with someone and still get to working with them. I did that with Sony. When I was working on Tum Aur Main with Sony, I never even went into the office to pitch Tum Aur Main. It got sent to an A&R that I knew that I was working with, who then pitched it to his seniors. The master and everything. I'm sitting at home. Like Nikhil and I never even stepped into a studio together because it was peak lockdown. Nikhil recorded his vocals on his own. I recorded my vocals on my own. The only time I met anybody from Sony was when I went to shoot the video because we shot the video, and that was obviously a label production. So I saw people who were working at Sony. That was the only time I like interacted in real life with people from the label. So I don't think that would have been possible before the pandemic. The pandemic really changed the way people work in India, but that's like very common here. Like you could just people hire each other. Like if I'm an artist and I want to work with a photographer for artwork for an album cover or whatever, I might find them on Instagram, DM them and be like, hey, cool, let's work. And it just happens. And that's been a model that's existed pre-pandemic. in LA that didn't really exist to as much of an like with as much ease in India. That but it kind of does now. Like people just hit each other up and they're like, "Let's work," and it happens.
Let's work for free.
That's but that's honestly that's common everywhere. People will always there. I don't think that'll ever change. Like there will always be someone who thinks they can fleece you for everything you're worth because they're entitled and never take that deal. Money in hand is work done. If not, then bye bye.
I actually, I'm still laughing on this word. Let's work. Yeah, I'll do for free. Terms and conditions apply.
The one of the videographers I worked with on one of my music videos of I don't want to out him, but he actually got one of those DMs not a few days ago, and he was telling me about it. He was like, this person that DM'd him had like I think close to like 1 million followers and was like, "Oh, it's unpaid. The shoot is unpaid." Like what?
Reaction.
He just didn't even reply. He was like, I don't know what to say to this. Like, how do I respond to this? What do I
Pathetic. Fantastic, man. Yeah. So, you also have an album, High Priestess. The name is sexy. The name is absolutely gorgeous. You have, I don't know, man. How did you write 12 songs for that album, and how much time did it took? And like, take us through the journey of that album.
Oh my gosh. So some of those songs, of course, were written years prior. Like all the previous releases. Quite a few of my previous releases were on High Priestess, like Clutch, Goddess, Wolf, Farewell came out before High Priestess came out. So all of those were all written like years prior. But High Priestess itself, I started writing during the pandemic. Like the rest of the songs, I started writing during the pandemic. And I used to produce a lot when I first started music school. I used to produce my own songs. Um, and then I kind of stopped because I can't remember who it was now, but it was somebody that I looked up to at the time. And she was like, well, I don't know if you like just leave the production to other people. Like it was like very much that energy. And I was young, I was naive, I wasn't sure where I was going. I hadn't figured out my sound yet. I was like, oh, okay, I guess. So I put down production for a little while, which served me because I really honed in my songwriting and my singing capabilities. But then with the pandemic, I had so much time on my hands, and with the time difference and everything, and just being so far away, like the producers I was used to working with were here in LA, and I was back home in India. And I was like, you know what? Let me pick back up with the production again. And so I just started playing around and just started writing for fun. And being one locked up at home and two being extremely single, I was like, okay, what am I going to write about? And so I just write about very abstract concepts and ideas and things that I wanted to either welcome into my life or I was like feeling. For example, like Queen of Coins was really about um financial abundance, like calling in just like riches. And I was like, what would that feel like? And I'm also very spiritual, and the Queen of Coins is actually a card in the tarot that represents that energy. So I was like, what would it sound like if the Queen of Coins was an actual person and she like wrote a song? So like it was just like a very open, creative, strange approach to songwriting that I was taking, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And after I wrote Queen of Coins, I was like, huh, it would be interesting to do this with like multiple different archetypes. So Empress came from the same place. Empress is also a card in the tarot. And Empress is also an energy. Like we do that all the time right now in our culture. Like go queen, like every woman's a queen, blah blah blah. But like what does it mean to like actually dive into that energy and embody that energy? And then the same thing with High Priestess. Like I was raised very spiritual. So these are not concepts that are strange to me, but I see them thrown around just as words and labels that are supposed to be cool. And I was like, okay, no, I actually want to explore them and
Yeah.
share that. So that's kind of where it came from. And I was just exploring what it felt like to produce on my own without, I'm not saying that having other people in the room is bad. I enjoy it very much. But it was just a different energy to have not only the songwriting and the melodic structure be my own, but have also the production be entirely my own. Like, what does that sound like? It just started off as an exploration. I wasn't thinking of like putting an album together. But then I had all of these songs that I really loved and I noticed a theme. So I was like, okay, I think it's a good time to put out a full length album. Because I had enough music out at this point. I was like, I feel like this is more of a statement. Like, here's a body of work that really represents who I am.
Presents Nikita. And I'll perform all the songs with my fantastic vocals. Well, so while you were in India, what's your favorite Indian food? Don't
Which
say
I
vada pav.
no, which I also going back to that point, I did that part on my own too, which is insane. Your brain breaks at some point, audio engineering your own vocals, producing your own music, editing all of it, sending out stems, planning the videos, like your brain breaks.
Yeah, yeah. So there, yes, so going back to the first point, it's kind of like a burnout that happens sometimes because there's a lot of work that goes behind everything.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. For sure.
Um, so where are you like thinking of touring, like in India or abroad?
I don't know about touring in this year, simply because I moved back and I'd been away for long enough. And with the pandemic, a lot of people that I was working with either just stopped working in the industry or moved. And so I spent a lot of my time here rebuilding connections, writing with new people. Also, just moving here is a lot, right? You're like back in a different city. Half the people you knew aren't there. Like you're rebuilding work connections. So I was like, okay, fine. Let me just focus again on putting out music this year. But I definitely want to start touring at the top of next year because I feel like I have so much material now and I really, really want to perform live. I love performing live. That's how I started. Even when I was younger, we would have these productions near my home for like May 1st for Maharashtra Day, and we would put on like 2 hour shows and I would dance and we would have scripts and like all of this stuff. Like I love being on stage and I've missed being on stage. So I'm looking to hopefully get back to that at the top of next year.
So what will be your first country? India?
No, I think I'm gonna stay local for now. I mean, you have to remember I'm still independent. It might seem like my success warrants a multi-country tour, but I'm still independent, so I have to work with those constraints as well. I would love to do multiple countries, but I'm probably gonna stick to America right now. Probably do like both coasts, some probably Austin as well, like Austin, other similar cities, and yeah.
Fantastic. Do let me know when you're coming to India.
Oh, absolutely.
The first one I'm coming. Uh, uh, three tips for artists and musicians who want to make it as a career. Uh, Musicians who are probably well known and do a lot of stuff, and for musicians and artists who are doing things for a while and probably getting somewhere or maybe not getting somewhere sometimes.
Okay, so you said three tips for artists who are starting off,
Starting off,
and then for artists who are established,
and then during the establishing phase, like they're getting results, not getting results.
Got it. Okay.
Again,
So
a hard question, huh?
oh, that's actually a really good question. Love that question. For artists who are starting off, find performers that you love, watch them perform, write down what you would do differently. Very important. Very, very important. Trust me, it'll take you a long way. For artists who are already successful, don't get comfortable.
I was expecting that.
The minute you get comfortable is the minute you have messed up. Do not get comfortable. That doesn't mean that you walk around feeling insecure because, hello, you're doing the damn thing. You're successful. Be proud of that. But don't get comfortable. I love using artists like Beyonce as that example because if you look at every single one of her albums, she's done something that, even though it's pop, is entirely different. None of her albums sound like each other. They're a whole world in themselves. And she takes time to craft that world. She's not sitting there going, I'm Beyonce, I'm just going to make the same music over and over again. She learns and she grows. And what is she now? Like in her she entering her 40s. Like she's been in this
Yeah,
industry 20 plus years and she's still evolving. Like hats off. Like that's
yeah,
an there. For artists who feel like they're hitting like a ceiling, and that's a lot of us.
yeah,
One, the ceiling might be in your head. uh, because I think what happens with a lot of us is that we're constantly doing so much, we forget how much we've accomplished. So take breaks and on a daily basis, go back and look at what you've recently done because you will be surprised at how appreciative you are of your own accomplishments. So that's one. And two, stay consistent. Stay consistent. Do not stop. You might want to take breaks because you feel burnout or whatever, but do not stop because anybody that has been an overnight success, if you interview them, they will tell you it was never an overnight success.
yeah.
They
It took 13 years, maybe 20 years to have that one night success.
Yeah, it took 13 years to have that one song that went viral out of nowhere. Doja Cat failed. Doja Cat's first album flopped. Amala was a flop before she became viral. And that was a whole album flopped before she went viral. And look at her career now. Like there's other stories.
Astonishing.
I can't remember the name of the artist, but she was actually wow, I'm trying to like remember her name. Anyways, but she was on an interview and she had this song that was blowing up at the time, and the interviewer asked her like what was that like to be an overnight success, and she was like, I've been doing this for six years now, and none of my songs have been successes until now. So I would like to tell you that this is not an overnight success. I've been doing this for 6 years. Always keep that in mind because it's easy to give up and think like, okay, it's not working out. And this
It
is
can't be done.
yeah, and like I don't have the recipe or I don't have the blueprint or whatever else. That's not the case. You just have to keep pushing until you break past that barrier. And maybe it's not even a barrier. That's the most important thing to remember. Because I've learned from my own career that there are people watching you and you don't even know that they're watching you.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Silently in the background, like looking at everything you're doing, how you're doing it. They might even appreciate it. It might not even be like haters. It might just be people who genuinely appreciate you, but they don't actively show it. Like, how many times do you personally also, like, we all have Instagram? How many times you scroll through Instagram, you want to like something, but you forget it and you just scroll past it, even though if it's funny, you laughed really hard, or if it was cool, you were like, oh my God, wow. And you just didn't hit the like button, and you just past it. How many times have we all done it? We all do it, right? So there's people watching you, inspired by you that you don't even know about because they simply do not interact with your content the same way. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. Don't lose hope just because one song didn't stream well. The next one might.
The next one might, or the next one, and vice versa. What are we expecting from Nikita? An EP, an album, a single?
Lots of singles. I'm actually going to
Hey,
be
come on!
sharing.
You just released the lo-fi version 4 days ago. Come on, take a break. Go for a dinner.
I felt like I took a break. I put out I had Bad Trip queued up before Zindagi Hai Abhi was even out. So Zindagi Hai Abhi, the music video was coming out, and Bad Trip was already in the pipeline. And then I came here, and I immediately, like within the month of me coming here, I shot the video, and then I took a break. I took a few months off, and then I came back with a bang. And I'm like, I'm not stopping now. The rest of the year is gonna be singles, so I don't want to stop. The next one that's coming out, I'm actually shooting for this coming Monday.
Okay.
For the and I'm really excited for it. This one is really fun. Again, written around like I wouldn't say the same time as Bad Trip, but written. This was written during the pandemic. Actually, this one I'm really really excited for it. It's called Apsara. It's
Okay.
almost entirely in Hindi. And I wrote it myself. So it was like this phase where I was writing exclusively in Hindi, and it was just a lot of fun. And yeah,
Our Desi brain woke up.
yes, the Desi Brain woke up. No, I don't even think it woke up. I think for a long time, what also happens is when you're trying to make pop music, like the first barrier to get past is, oh, it has to be in English.
Yeah, yeah, yes. I was about to say this, the language.
Yeah, it has to be a specific way. And then I started to slowly chip away at that when I wrote Bad Trip, and then I wrote Wolf after I wrote Bad Trip, and both of them I was like, oh, I want to incorporate Hindi somehow. And then during the pandemic, because I had already had songs that I wanted to put out and I could just play without worrying about releases, I just went for it. And I wrote, I think, like 5 or 6 songs that were just purely Hindi, and they were just a lot of fun to do. So we're gonna see a lot of that this year.
I don't know about the audience. I'll be waiting personally.
I'm very excited. I hear that a lot. Like I think like it's just well received in Hindi because more of our people speak the language. So of course it is. You know?
And being from India, Hindi is like machi bhat.
Exactly.
Um, well, that was pretty interesting. For the audience, I'm saying she doesn't need an introduction, like, of course, but it's my duty that I'll just put all of the links she has to her entire. Like, she has dedicated half of her life just writing songs and recording and producing. So please do check out and hear them. She just released a new lo-fi version with, of course, she just said it, Amaal Mallik. Please do listen to that. I'll put every link possible of Nikitaa in the description. Thank you so much for coming and taking some time out. It means a lot, man.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you
me.
so
This was
much. And go have a dinner or something. Huh?
yeah. Go to
Don't put out
sleep.
more songs before a week. Come on now. I am tired of looking at you.
Go to sleep. I'm gonna go to sleep now. Don't worry.
Yep. Thank you so much once more for everyone joining in. And thank you so much for Nikita. Nikita, thank you so much for joining in once more.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a great day ahead. And I wish you a lot of success in life. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Bye bye. I like that.
Yeah.
Bye bye.